The hearing with former FBI Director James Comey wrapping up. We're going to get your reaction shortly here on C-SPAN 3 and C-SPAN Radio. Let's take you live now to comments from committee member Marco Rubio.
And so the question is, was it something he said, shouldn't have said, or is it something that was part of a broader effort to impede an investigation? That is the fundamental question that people are seeking to answer, and today's testimony is a piece of a broader puzzle. We still have not heard directly from Admiral Rogers or Director Coates about what the President asked of them. So until that happens, and other information is forthcoming, but again, those issues are going towards what's probably more in the purview of the Judiciary Committee and or Mueller. But our focus is on, obviously, the case of Director Comey, how this impacted counterintelligence function of the FBI.
So your posture in this hearing was distinctly different. Your posture in this hearing was distinctly different than your posture yesterday towards the other two witnesses. What explains that?
The witnesses yesterday weren't answering questions. Director Comey was. He had already written a statement that answered a lot of questions. There's no point in me asking the same questions that Feinstein and Warner had already asked. But the difference is yesterday we couldn't get an answer on a fundamental question. They said yesterday that they had not been pressured, but they would not answer if they had been asked. Director Comey didn't hold back on anything other than things that were unclassified, so I wanted to kind of focus in on what we're talking about here and remove what we're not talking about here. And so there are three things. Three requests the President. He asked for loyalty. Others had focused in on that. He asked that the public be made aware that he was not under investigation, and my point on that is that that's what Director Comey did today anyways. He had already informed other people of. And he asked that the investigation of Flynn be dropped. And he asked that one time. And so those are the three things we're talking about. I thought it's also fair to point out that the President at no time asked the Director to stop the broader investigation on Russian interference. And again, that came from Director Comey's own testimony. So we don't go into these things looking to be antagonistic, but if the answers are being answered, what draws the most antagonism here is when they don't answer your question. Director Comey was incredibly forthcoming today, including giving his own opinion and his own views on certain matters beyond simply the facts.
So, Senator, with his testimony today, you didn't feel you heard any clear evidence of obstruction?
Well, that's a legal determination to be made by prosecutors, not by the Intelligence Committee. Our focus here today is we want to hear from the chief officer in charge of counterintelligence on how the President conducted himself on perhaps the biggest counterintelligence issue before America today. And I don't think anybody would leave this hearing and say to you that what the President said in the Oval Office on the 14th of February was appropriate. Whether it rises to criminality, you know, I think there's significant doubts about whether it rises to that level. And my hope is that there are people in the White House that have advised the President about what's appropriate and what isn't when you're interacting with the FBI for the reasons that Director Comey outlined. It's not clear why that didn't happen sooner, and it was a disservice to the President.
But what's your feeling at this point? Do you believe it does rise to criminality?
I'm not prepared to reach a conclusion on that because we're not done with all the other pieces that are missing. Part of it is we need to hear what Admiral Rogers and Director Coates have to say. They didn't answer the question yesterday, and they didn't have the closed hearing, and they didn't come to the closed hearing afterwards. So,
Senator Rubio, what did you make of Comey admitting that he initiated the leaks?
I was surprised. I'm sure you were surprised. The idea not just that he initiated the leaks on the memos, but that he did so for purposes of triggering a special prosecutor, I thought was perhaps the most explosive portion of the hearing. I was, quite frankly, impressed by his honesty. That's the first time I've ever seen a witness come before Congress and admit they leaked something through an intermediary to get it through the press. But, you know, I don't know what to make of it, other than the fact that he wanted there to be a special prosecutor because he's upset that he was fired. But I'm not sure that's inappropriate or not, but it tells you that if he's leaked it to a friend to give it to the press, there's no reason why the committee should not have those memos.
Senator McCain said that there was a double standard, perhaps, between the way Director Comey treated then-candidate Hillary Clinton versus the way versus President Trump. Do you agree that there is a double standard in the way that he treated them?
I didn't follow that line of questioning very well, to be honest with you. I think they're different. I mean, no matter how one may feel about the email investigation, I still have concerns about the way those emails were handled. That was an active investigation that went on during a period of time. It was opened, it was conducted, and it was closed. This is an ongoing investigation. It has not, in fact, it just started. And so I think they're different. And we'll have to wait and see that. I don't have any concerns about the way it's being investigated. Every single person and everything we have seen shows that this matters. The broader issue of the Russian interference and whatever issues spin off from that are all being fully investigated, and that's what the American people deserve.
What do you specifically hope to clear up in closed session?
Well, it's obviously there are parts of that we can't discuss, and I'm curious to see which parts of the memo or which parts of his recollection with regards to this involve matters that are classified versus confidential. I don't think there is a protection for things you may view as confidential, which was what was so disturbing yesterday by Director Coates and Rogers, two people I like very much, but just because you think something should be confidential doesn't mean you have a right not to share it with an investigative committee. So we'll see. Obviously, there are details of the investigations and perhaps matters about the overall environment regarding the interaction between the director and the president that might be more insightful.
Do you think the response to Russia for their meddling in the 2016 election has been adequate? And if not, what more should be done?
Well, that's part of what really the most important thing we're going to do here, assuming that there's been no wrongdoing on the part of the executive branch, is tell the American people to what extent the Russians interfered, how they did it, so that we can A, respond, and B, be prepared for the next time. That really is the most important thing we're going to do here, assuming there is nothing that comes of these other elements of it, and that's part of the work we're doing now, and that's the part that we really need to know, because there's an election about a year and a half from now, and as you've heard from multiple witnesses, they're going to do it again, and they're doing it now all over the world.
Senator, do you have any concerns about the Attorney General and whether he might be in legal jeopardy based on what you heard in there today?
I don't know. I didn't hear anything today that pointed to that.
His interactions with James Comey, his potential recusal from all of this investigation, questions about whether he conducted himself appropriately.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. And if in fact, probably the appropriate committee to oversee that would be judiciary, because that's who he responds to. But I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I didn't hear anything off the top of my head today that triggered that notion, but I don't know. I don't want to tell you no. I don't recall. I really was focused in on. So obviously, in these committees, there's no point in me asking the same question other people asked. So the fundamental question I had was, did you feel at any time like you were going to be fired unless you did these two things? And that question had been asked by a number of people. The second thing I wanted to make sure was, did the president ask you not to conduct the Russia investigation? He had made clear in his written testimony that he didn't, and I thought it was fair to the president and to the truth that fact be out there that the president did not. The third thing is that Flynn meeting, was that the only time he brought it up, or was something he was repeatedly doing? And he cleared that up. It was the only time he had done it. And then, I thought it was important right before me when Senator Risch asked the question about I hope you get rid of the investigation. His perception of it was that it was a demand. And when you put that together with the ask of loyalty, the setting in the Oval Office, the power of the presidency, and all these other things, you clearly had an FBI investigator that at a minimum, an FBI director felt, intimidated, for lack of a better term, certainly pressured, although he didn't end up acting on that. So that's what I really wanted to hone in on is, because the most important way to get to the truth is to get through, answer as many questions as you can get answered. What was the cloud? The cloud was the overall Russian investigation, but what was the specific?
We will leave this and take you live to the comments from the ranking member and the chairman of the Intelligence Committee.
Russian involvement in the 2016 elections. It also enabled the American people to understand the massive amounts of stories that's been out there and to sort through those and to have an individual that can lay some factual context to it. This is nowhere near the end of our investigation. And I think it's safe to say today that next week we hope to work with Special Counsel Mueller to work out clear pathways for both investigations, his and ours, to continue, to work on deconfliction of witnesses and potential testimony. But we're more confident today that we can, through this process, work through a very bipartisan and thorough investigation that at the end of it answers many of the questions that the American people might have today.
I want to simply add, I was very proud of how all of the members conducted themselves today. I thought it was very important that the American people get a chance to hear Jim Comey's statements about what all has transpired. The one thing, even if we may have different views on where some of these questions may lead, the one message that I hope all Americans will take home is recognizing how significant the Russian interference in our electoral process was, how it goes to the core of our democracy, and that we've got to be prepared to make sure that we are in a better defensive position in 2018, 2019, and frankly, in my home state as early as next week where we have a primary. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, does that concern you?
All right, everybody, I need you on either side of the rope stand. One side or the other. Pick a side, but I need you right there now. Hey, sorry, this is me. And I'm also making the rope stand right now. So Stephanie. You guys, the best. One side or the other. Nobody in the way. North Carolina's Richard Burr and Virginia's Mark Warner, the chairman and ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, which just wrapped up their hearing with former FBI Director James Comey. He was fired just about a month ago on May 9th by President Trump. His hearing today focusing on the Russian hacking of the 2016 elections, his interactions with President Trump over the last 3 or 4 months or so, and the fate of former National Security Director Michael Flynn. We are opening up our phone lines to hear from you, your thoughts on the hearing today. And here's how you do that. 202-748-8921 is our Republican line. 202-748-8920 for Democrats, for independents and all others, 202-748-8922. We'll also look at lots of tweets out there, the Comey hashtag. We'll look for those.